R&B the podcast. It's the hottest show of 2023. R&B the podcast. This is Blake and Russ is here with me.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome back. R&B podcast episode 40.
40.
40.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I yelled in the mic again.
Nah, that's all good.
Thank God for this opportunity to have this discussion with my boy. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in last week on our financial discussion with Tyler Zavala. Appreciate him. That was great. Got a lot of good feedback. We will be continuing with our guest series. Got a little bit of scheduling discrepancies, but be on the lookout for that. And got to give a shout out to Rhythm and Balance. Excuse me, and sorry for yelling again.
It's all good.
Rhythm and Balance for producing this show. So grateful for everything that goes into this beautiful production.
Man.
Elevate Personal Training LLC, your premier health coaching services in the Southwest. Also available online. And who you got to shout out, Russ?
Man, shout out to my brother. Shout out to my family. You know what I mean? My brother, he comes through and he just has conversations with me about wild topics, just anything that is on his mind. And it kind of made me realize how throughout my life, I never really... It's not like who I've become is all on me. There's a lot of people who decided that as well, who guided me in certain directions, gave me certain books to read, sent me certain links to documentaries, and was just like, hey, check this out. And yeah, I'm like my own person and grown now, but just been helped out by so many people. So shout out to my brother, shout out to all my friends and everybody who likes to have conversations with me and just kick it and expand our knowledge. So this is what we do here on the podcast, and that's kind of what I've done in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that.
That's always special to me when someone sends me educational material, a link, a book or something. It's so much more meaningful than a TikTok or a funny video to me. And when an inquisitive idea makes someone think of me, it makes me feel good, right?
Oh, yeah, every time.
Yeah, because I like to spark imagination and, evoke the desire to have certain conversations. So when people are like ready to engage in that with me, I take it to heart, and it's definitely something I've grown to appreciate and enjoy. And I'm sure you have similar experiences, not only because of the settings that we work in, but just how we like to cultivate our relationships, And I, recently have been understanding not everybody's looking to explore personal development. Some people just out here living, which is fine. We all have different interests and goals, but there are certain goals that I feel you cannot attain unless you seek that personal development.
For sure. And there's certain ideas that we can't get away from. It's like if we put a lot of our self-worth into material items that we gain, then eventually that esteem is going to crumble. We see this in midlife crises and different things of that nature, but I think that that's a truth for everybody. No matter if we go far in one route, gaining a lot of material possessions, eventually we're going to have to come back to our philosophy and what do we believe about ourselves and our mortality and who we are and what we're adding into this world and all these similar ideas that sometimes just a great conversation with a friend can spark in you and make you go deeper within.
Yeah, and that mortality is a big key there, because I go back and forth with that. I've experienced death with people and guided people to the other side, if you will, and we were talking about being exposed to things on the internet sometimes, seeing people get their lives taken in like graphic videos that you don't expect, and it's just something that we all have to acknowledge, that with life comes death, no matter what. That's always the end result of a life, right? And it can happen in so many different ways. And, through the pandemic, me having those experiences, I at times would, compare it to like being in the military and like try to really just understand the trauma that I had from that. But with the recent events overseas, I know that, my situation is one of its own, and it still was kind of awful and did what it did. But military conflict and that type of death and that level of trauma is just another level up from what I've seen,
For sure. And I think that shows you that no matter what side you're on in a belief system, when you see a human being lose their lives, it is going to be traumatic, right? That person could be completely in a belief that you don't agree with. They could be racist and hateful towards everything that you love. But if you watch them get executed, it's not going to feel good within your soul. And you can't even
Shouldn't.
justify it. Like, wow, that person sided with that group, so I
Right.
don't feel it the same way. No, because you've now entered into this human realm where you see your fragile body empathizing with this fragile body that was just destroyed, and it makes us feel a certain way no matter what.
Yeah, and that's why empathy is so important. You know, it's easy to draw the parallels when you have a dramatic example like that, but even when it comes to interacting with homeless people or, you know, someone that's been injured or someone that has had emotional trauma, you know, that you're aware of, right? We have to give people grace and be understanding that we heal from things at different rates and we deal with things in different ways, and we all go through these difficult life situations. And you brought it up on a previous podcast where we can't compare trauma,
No.
right? It doesn't work that way. So it's like if one group thinks that they deserve justice and another group is being mistreated, it's not right for the initial group to discredit what the other group's going through, you know?
Definitely. All of our trauma, it can't be compared, and we experience things the way we experience them, and we create the narrative about what we experienced in our own mind, right?
Yeah.
So you can never think that just because you created a stronger narrative about resiliency or how you overcame, that you can compare to someone who hasn't gotten to that point yet and be like, oh man, it's not that bad because compared to what I experienced. No, because you have different words to call what you experienced.
And different tools to deal with those things, right? We're not all equipped to deal with stuff. And that's why, you know, a long time I would blame myself for not handling certain things in the hospital better. I'm like, these small women are going through these same situations as me. I'm supposed to be tough. I'm supposed to be X, Y, and Z. And I felt like I wasn't performing to the extent that I could or I should, and the people around me were saying otherwise. But I've always been one to kind of give myself my own grade and my own evaluation, and that can be good and bad. Now it's good. Back then it was bad because I wouldn't really take the compliments from other people to heart, and I was so hard on myself. And just knowing that, you know, any level of trauma, we all have to process that, and it can be harder on someone than others, and it's never going to be what you expect, right? And you should never feel bad that you're trying to heal from trauma. Like, certain things may hurt you worse than you expected or worse than you think they should, and that's just a fact of the matter. We can't control that piece, but we can control the effort that we put into healing and addressing those issues and trying to, you know, come to terms with what we've experienced rather than bottling it up and ignoring it, you know?
Yeah, and you also can't beat yourself up over the boundaries that you choose to place in order for you to heal, right?
Yeah.
If I need to like create a castle to go heal inside of, I'm not going to be upset about what boundaries I need to create for my castle, but it might impede upon what someone else wants from me. And that is where we get into dilemmas, because it's like, while I'm trying to heal, this person might want me to be in a certain space, and I got to let them know, like, that's not the space I can be in right now. I can't share this video with you. If you send it to me, I'm not going to emphasize it and give you my thoughts on it because I'm in a space where I can't take this in right now. You know what I mean? And you got to respect that if you love me.
Yeah, and a lot of times we don't get a warning, right? I don't know if you're comfortable sharing the situation with the kid that saw the video.
Yeah, I'll share. And it really doesn't have, this is separate from what has to do with the war going on between Palestine and Israel, or Hamas and Israel, whatever that might be. I worked with a student who was sharing with me that somebody sent him a video from Reddit that showed a young boy his age committing suicide using a shotgun to basically shoot himself in the head. And somehow this video got on the internet, and he watched it. And this is a kid that, you know, kind of prides himself on being a little more rugged and resilient in tough situations because he's had to go through a lot. But when he digested this video from the internet, it messed with him so much, and he felt like he wasn't able to sleep. He was experiencing all these different effects from it, and he just didn't know how to even start the conversation about it. He's like, bro, I don't even know how to talk about that. The first thing he told me is that he has been thinking about one thing all weekend. That's how he started it. And then he's just crying. And I'm like, you don't have to share what that one thing is, but this is a space where you can have that conversation if you want.
Yeah.
And then he proceeded to tell me about what he saw. And even him describing it to me made me sit there for a second like, oh,
Yeah.
that's deep. Even just my imagination of it is deep. So I can only imagine how you felt watching it. And then after a while, he starts talking to me about how, you know, him taking accountability in this situation means that he needs to create parameters on what he'll watch and what he'll allow to be shared with him on his device. And I'm like, yeah, you know, unfortunately, that is what your age group is going to have to go through. It's figuring out that not everything is good to take in.
Yeah, and it's sad that a 12-year-old has to come to that conclusion. He shouldn't be the one that's having to make those decisions of whether or not he's exposed to certain things, right? And that's just the world we live in. You know, I get excited about technological innovations and having access to information and being able to communicate across the world and such, but there are definitely negative implications that come with that, and a lot of that revolves around our children. And, you know, like you said, me as a father now, my perspective on all these situations is different because I'm in a position where my priority is protecting my daughter, and then thinking of her being in that situation. Who knows how early in her life she could be exposed to certain videos or whatever information that's not suited for someone that's in their early years. And that's just a reality that we have to face and prepare for. So that's why I like to, you know, have these harder conversations because it's real. And if you don't talk about it ahead of time, then you're going to come across it when you don't want to and you're not prepared. And it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to process it because you've never even thought about it before, right?
Right. And like I was saying earlier, I think it always reminds us that beneath all the things that we believe and subscribe to that make us our personality or make us into a group of just beliefs or religions or whatever it is, that when we see somebody being harmed, it hurts us. And it doesn't matter who they are. A lot of people think like, oh, I could watch somebody who's done some heinous crime get tortured and I'm going to feel like a righteous feeling about it. I don't really believe that. I think
Yeah.
that to a certain extent, you're going to start to feel very sad no matter what. No matter what.
Yeah, justice can come in a lot of different flavors, and some of them don't taste as good. Um, yeah, and that's, I mean, our justice system, we can talk about that all day, right? So there's just so many demonstrations in public and private that would evoke a different response from a different person, and we just have to be aware of those differences. I think that awareness is our saving grace in all these situations, you know. Some people want to, you know, hide themselves from the realities of things going on the other side of the world, right? They might ask, why would you expose me to that? Like, why do we have to talk about this? This isn't affecting my life, but it's affecting a whole lot of people's lives. In some way, you're interconnected with those people, whether you like it or not, right? And it does give us opportunity to have more empathy and be more understanding of one another. And again, those are extreme examples, but all of this lies on a spectrum. And if we can connect with people that have small differences from us and that are our neighbors, then it'll help us connect with the people experiencing a whole different reality on the other side of the world, right?
Yeah.
Because we're all in our own stories, we all have our own experiences, and over time, we make our own perspective. We have our own realities in a sense. You know, we have this joined reality that we have an agreement upon, but I don't think the average person understands the intricacies of how our brain works and takes in information and how perspective changes over time, right? A lot of people will get upset when someone changes. It's like, oh, you've changed. It's like, well, yeah, I hope so. I'm living life. Like that's the whole purpose of this, right? You're not supposed to die the same way that you were born. And so with that mindset of growth, you know, there's just so many difficult topics in the world that you just take what you can get from it. You know, the show must go on, I always say, but everything can be a growth opportunity. That doesn't mean that we have to celebrate it or promote it, but when things happen, you just have to make a decision of how it's going to affect you. And then there's going to be a piece of it that you can't control, so you got to try to take control of it and just digest it in an intentional manner, right?
Sure, and I think one of the reasons why it's fun to like study war from afar, obviously without being directly involved in it, one of the reasons it's fun to study war is because some of the laws of conflict exist on the macro and micro. So if we can understand why there is tension between two parties, sometimes it helps us handle our interpersonal conflicts, right? And the things that happen with us, like with people day to day, right? Because if I do something to you, not knowing that you're festering this resentment towards me, and then I participate in your energy back towards me, I'm adding fuel to a fire, and then I find myself with a consequence that I did not want when I started this.
Yeah.
And if I can recognize when the signs of your resentment towards me come out, then I can remove myself from the situation or make my choice to make sure that I'm not going to be involved with the conflict.
Yeah. And I think a good setting for that is on the road because there's so much crazy decision making that happens on the highways of Arizona. And a lot of people get very upset, and understandably so. But you don't know what's going on in that car. You don't know if they're on a rush to go save somebody. They got a bad call or something. You don't know if that person just committed a crime. You know, my cousins got in a situation when we were younger where they had a car accident because they were doing something they shouldn't be doing, and the person that they were involved with had just got out of prison that day. And yeah, it's just like, what are the odds, right? But that's the thing. Certain situations, certain risks you don't take because you don't know the odds. And life is about risk-taking behavior. Life is about risk versus benefit, right? But when it comes down to it, you really have to choose those battles that you take. And every time you take a risk, you're putting the possibility of having to be in a battle, right?
Yeah, you are taking the possibility of having to be in a battle. And we're in Arizona. Funny you bring up like road rage because we're in Arizona where guns are common. People are armed in their vehicles, right?
Yeah.
So it's like when you get in conflict on the road, you got to really be.
That's
Man.
always in my. I treat everybody like they're strapped.
Yeah, same. Honestly, because
I'm
I
not
see so
thinking
many
of
people
it.
who are openly carrying. Like,
Yeah,
I
it's
just
normal.
imagine
It's
everyone
normal
is.
here. Yeah, for anybody that hasn't been to Arizona, it is literally the Wild Wild West. There's a whole lot of guns, and it's almost necessary. I heard a interesting perspective because I've had an evolving perception of guns. I used to hate guns, and then I shot some guns. I'm like, okay, guns are okay, but still a little afraid of them. And then war situations come up, things like that nature, and I'm like, okay, I understand the need for guns, but I'm still not like a huge fan. But somebody made a point that part of the protection that we have as Americans is that we have more guns than people. So it's like if somebody was messing with us, it's not like they're just fighting against our military once they come onto our land. It's like all of us, basically. So, in a way, it might be a benefit to us. You can talk about gun violence, I think is a, very touchy subject for whatever reason. I think when it comes down to it, everything needs rules and regulations. We as a humanity are just not responsible. I'm going to say that as a whole, if we all can do whatever we want, we're not going to make the best decision. So it's good for us to have rules in place. It's good for us to have freedoms. People don't like feeling restricted, but even when it comes to freedom of speech, there's a point where I thought censorship was necessary and was almost essential, but now over time I understand why there's such a fine line between being able to do that, right?
Yeah.
And why impeding upon our freedoms can slowly push into something that's a lot worse than what we would initially think it's going to turn into.
Yeah.
So there's balance between everything, and that's just even more to prove a point why we have differing perspectives. We have different opinions, and we have to accept each other for having different opinions because we have different situations, and it's so hard to say right and wrong. When people are arguing between two things, there's a reason. There's not a whole lot of crazy people that have no clue what they're talking about. When there's opposing sides, they're both going to make good points. Right?
Yeah.
And then it comes down to a decision of who you want to believe and side with. So that's one thing that is so difficult to me because that awareness is clearly not prevalent within our government. And I think that's why we have so much separation from the top down, right? And if we saw more amicable situations and more cooperation at the top, I think that we would have a lot less tension at the bottom. But there's always somebody thriving off negativity as well.
Yeah, there is. And I feel like, when you're thriving off of negativity, it's interesting because I was watching the movie Insidious the other day. It's spooky season. So I've been on, sometimes I've been on
We
my
watched Halloween. I was like, oh gosh, this is
Right.
intense. Yeah.
But it's interesting, man, because this was the fourth Insidious, I think, when they're telling the story of Elise, who's like the woman who is the medium, who's able to kind of communicate with both worlds. And they showed when she was young, she grew up in this home where her dad was abusing her, and she had this gift to see ghosts or whatever, and her dad didn't believe in it. So whenever she would be talking about the spirit she saw, her dad would beat her, and it caused more pain. And then when she got older, she went back to that home and did helped the person that lived there, because there was a whole bunch of demonic stuff happening, and she knew because she had grew up there. She was like, I know exactly what you're facing, right? So it was interesting because when she went into the little spirit world or whatever, she ends up seeing her dad, and this demon that runs the home or lives in the home or whatever gives her this stick and is like, you finally get the opportunity to get revenge on your dad. And at first, Elise, she's very level-headed and smart, but she takes a stick and she starts hitting her dad. And you can see it's this cathartic release. And it's funny because when she gave her the stick, I'm thinking nah, Elise not going to do it. She's going to drop it and do the better thing. She starts hitting her dad with the stick. And the demon is sitting back getting bigger and happier. And I was like, that's some amazing imagery, because that's really what our trauma could be. We could try to go back and hurt the person that traumatized us, and that's what the demon would want you to do. That's what the dark spirit would want you to do, because you're just feeding more negativity. Or you drop the stick literally and get to the point where you forgive and release, and then that's where I think you get into the lighter energy. And so I thought that was really interesting imagery that they did on that movie with that, because the demon was so happy that she chose to get her revenge, and I was like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I could say with confidence there's a small population of people that were able to analyze that movie in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the beauty of Hollywood. They do send us a lot of messages that many people do overlook, but they are important. And yeah, that's a good correlation there, because I just truly believe when someone chooses to operate out of love, they have the upper hand, right? And love battling against each other, everybody's going to win. That's just not usually a battle that you see. It's hard to be had, because there's a different term for it.
Yeah.
It's a conversation. It's cooperation. It's collaboration. It's not a battle at that point, right?
Right.
And that's why in a team setting, that's what we all thrive or strive for, right? But I've never been able to understand why the world can't be on the same team, right?
Yeah.
Just because we look differently and we have different perception of what God is or isn't, and everything in between those two. But when we live next to one another and we're in the same country for the most part, that changes things, right? There's all of a sudden there's lines drawn in the sand, literally, and a different language spoken and a different priority at the top.
Yeah.
All of this destruction and evil starts to take over. And
when we get in that loop of what we're going to get back, we're going to get back at you from what you've done to me, that is going to be never ending violence. We see it in relationships, right? People will get to the point where they don't like their significant other, and then they try to make them feel like no one else would ever like them, because for some reason, since now you don't like this person and you've been so close to them, you want them to be unavailable for the rest of their lives and to hate themselves and have low self-esteem.
yeah,
And that seems to be on a mass level what happens sometimes. It's I don't want you to ever thrive.
yeah,
And then unfortunately, since I want that energy for you, I'm really just creating it for myself. And now it's because that there's people that just want to see someone they hate go their whole lives without positivity.
oh yeah.
And you're only doing that to yourself. The minute you want someone else to experience it, you're going to experience it.
We live in a world where people pride themselves off of being toxic, which I think is nuts.
Yeah.
Because if you are toxic, you're going to melt yourself away. just like a vat of acid,
For sure.
right? You can throw somebody else in the vat, but you are the acid. So what is it that you can possibly build up to?
Exactly. Lauryn Hill said it best on one of her songs. She said, "The ditch you dig for them, you might just end up in yourself." And that's exactly what happens every time.
Yeah, those are bars, and yeah, it's just so interesting. The basic concepts that we learn as children: treat each other where you want to be treated. You know, all those little sayings that we all know by heart and we've all been taught and we all used to live by. It's like some point in life we don't think those things are important anymore. And all of the things that we learn as children are important.
Yeah,
That's
because
why we learn them. It's the foundation, right? And then when you strip away that foundation, your castle is going to collapse. Whatever you've been building, it's all for nothing.
for sure. Because what happens is people start to treat you ways that you don't want to be treated. So then you're like, oh my gosh, I just met the 100th person that treated me how I don't want to be treated. So should I just start treating other people that way? You know what I mean? What's the point of me treating people how I want to be treated when I'm never treated how I want to be treated? And I think that people get to that point, and then now their heart becomes hardened with each experience that they choose to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, yeah. Every action comes with a reaction, right? And some people act surprised when they get a certain reaction. It's like, well, look at your action. Like, what did you anticipate? Like, was that not the algorithm that was drawn up in your head? Because that looked like 2 + 2 = 4 to me.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
you know, I give a lot of invitations out on our show. So I invite you to just look at life in that way and realize that you do have control of making the first move.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people are going to operate off of your energy. So if you have a strong positive energy, likely chances you're going to get strong positive reactions from other people.
Yeah, man. That's the math and the science.
So yeah, the biggest blessing in addition to this perspective that I've been developing is my daughter, and it's just a fresh perspective. You get to see everything kind of from a new lens again, and you have this new appreciation for all the basic things that you had started to overlook.
Yeah.
And you know, babies are very attentive and they pay attention to detail, and I try to be aware of how I speak and operate and look in front of my baby because I want to set the example. And I've definitely witnessed a lot of people that seem to forget about those things, but I also am understanding enough to know that being a parent is really hard, and you're playing a role as a parent, and it's hard to stay in character all the time, right? Because life is happening around you, and the baby's not aware of all these other things, but they are aware of you. And it's really hard to suppress the negativity, and sometimes I don't even know if that's the right thing to do, you know, because they need to understand negative emotions as well. They know that negative emotions happen, but they're temporary, and we work through them and forgive each other and make up in that sense, right? And so, just again, there's no right and wrong way to do these things, right?
Yeah.
You just have to try your best, and also, if you're operating out of love, it's hard to get the wrong answer, and you're going to be met with basically all the same difficulties regardless, right?
Yeah, and you know, you're speaking from a perspective of like somebody who's already tried to heal within, right? Because it's hard to operate out of love if you have like kinks in your hose, so to say. You turn it on, it's not on because you got all these kinks in it, and you got to like unravel that to be able to flow. I'm wondering from your perspective, when your daughter starts going to school, say she's like 9 years old in 4th or 3rd grade, whatever grade that is, and say your daughter came home and she was telling you like, Dad, today on the playground, these group of girls were telling me how ugly I am. And she's crying about it. It hurt her, right? It's huge because it got to her. Like, how would you deal with that situation?
Yeah, damage control is always going to be the hardest situation to be in. So I plan on being in the forefront and let her know every day that she is beautiful, and let her know every day that everybody else looks different than her. And there's a lot of other beautiful people in this world, and that doesn't take away from the fact that she's beautiful, and she's always going to be beautiful. And her beauty is not because of the smile that she has, but it's because of the way that she acts. And it's because of the energy that she gives off, right? And, you know, things happen to people where, you know, we age. You can be in an accident. You know, we look different over time. Sometimes we have this image of beauty, and it's like, oh, I don't look like that anymore, right? But you just have to know that you are more than your appearance, The same way that you're more than your occupation, you're more than the name on your birth certificate, right? You as a human being is so much more important in this whole game that we're playing. So I feel like I have a lot of, I guess I'll call them understandings, but I guess more so opinions about the world that I'm gonna share with my daughter as soon as she's able to have conversations with me. And I'm gonna ask her difficult questions, and I wanna know her opinion, and also just let her know, like, oh, those are good, but just realize a lot of people are gonna disagree with you, and that's okay too. You just need to know how to have a discussion about it.
Yeah.
And also, at the end of the day, whether or not I was going to say another kid or an adult, anybody, their opinion on what you look like is not going to change how we operate. It's not going to change the opportunities that we were given. It's not going to change the fact that we were placed on this earth by God to do amazing things. And the words that come out of someone's mouth in negativity are definitely not going to be the obstacle that we let disrupt our journey.
Right. That is a very small obstacle in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme,
but
right?
people get tripped up over them. That's a great answer that you just said. I mean,
A big thing for me, it's been a while since I've been to church, and my dad gets on me. He's like, "When's the last time you've been to church? Like, you're gonna go to church?" And I'm very spiritual. I believe in God. I talk to God. I pray to God. I have a strong relationship with God. And now at this phase of my life, I do see church as a very strong tool for me to help my daughter make those connections and develop that relationship, because I do understand that my relationship in God is basically unorthodox compared to the average person, I feel, in terms of like standard religions, because I don't really label myself with a certain religion.
right. But your relationship is one that a lot of people like in our age group identify with. A lot of people in our age group feel a strong spirituality and they're monotheistic, but they don't fully understand where they should identify.
But see, that's the thing. I do understand where I identify. It just doesn't have the label of one of the few religions I have to choose from.
Right, but you know you're monotheistic. You know that you
Yes.
believe in one supreme God, and you know
Yeah.
that you also believe that this immaterial world exists, which is like your spirit realm, right? Like those are things that you definitely believe.
Right. Along with science. And that's where it gets tricky to me.
Yeah.
Because I was telling Russ, I got into this conversation where these scientists are discussing if life is a simulation. And that can be like a very existential, crisis provoking thought.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand the neural circuitry in our bodies and the electricity of the world and photons and sound waves and quantum mechanics, all these things, how they come together so complicated. And then it's like, well, yeah, his perspective of that situation kind of makes sense too. I'm not going to let it diminish my belief in God, because I think that that's always going to be the most important thing.
Sure.
And, I'm always open for a discussion with someone else because I like knowing why other people don't believe in God. But it's just like a non-negotiable for me. And I don't even know if that's necessarily right or wrong, because in any other topic, I would say that I'm open to my mind being changed, my perspective being changed, right?
For sure.
But that's the one where I'm like, nope, I believe in God. I'm always going to believe in God until I die.
Yeah, because in my opinion, it's going to be like, well, how do your thoughts help you remove more fear from your walk? Do you have more faith because of your thoughts, or are your thoughts creating more anxiety?
Right.
And I think that that's an easy checkup to see if this philosophical thing you're going down is helping you or not, right? Did that make you feel like you can go face bigger challenges with less fear, or did it make you feel like you need to stay inside and hide from people, right? It's like,
and with God, I'm always going outside.
yeah, you remove fear, you have faith. And that's a really, I used to, one of my college teammates was a huge flat earther, right? He would come over and within 5 minutes, he's like, Russ, you're tripping because you think that this world, and I would ask him, I'd be like, bro, if it was flat, what would that do for me? Like, I got to wake up and go to class tomorrow. Like, I still have stuff to do. I'm like, what would it do for me if I knew this information? And he's like, it'd change everything. And I'm like, it really wouldn't though. Like, I don't understand what it would change, right? And he basically was just breaking it down where it's like, well, you would know that they're lying to you. And I'm like, would that help me?
That's why the internet's dangerous, man.
Yeah.
The internet's dangerous. That's one. So again, I try to understand everybody and their perspectives. That's one that I just can't wrap my mind around. But I'm not gonna sit and argue with somebody
Nah.
about it either.
But
You know?
I'm gonna dive into why do you think that that's gonna make your life better, and why are you trying to convince me of it? Because that means you think it will make my life
Yeah.
better.
What was his rationale behind you
Well,
needing to know this?
basically, it's just that it would blow open the doors to understand that I'm lied to about more than what I even think I'm lied to
Oh.
about. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Where you like, dude, I'm already black. Like,
Bro, there's so many things, you know. There was so many things I'm like, man, I would just be adding to my list of
yeah.
paranoia or whatever. Like I've already figured out a way to like be comfortable with the narratives that I believe are taught to me and what I needed to learn on my own and all these other things. And I know I'm going to grow. It's not like I'm going to be done with my mindset, but I'm always going to think about how is this aiding me, or is it just going to be like frivolous information that I can't do anything with?
Yep, yep. Narratives and stories and his story, right? And we all have different personal stories that group into this big collective story. And that's important to address because sometimes we think our story is the only one that's relevant. And we have to understand our story is short, our collective story is eternal. And that's another thing. People, it's scary when war happens. People always want to like predict the end of the world and stuff. I think that it's almost egotistical to think that the world's going to end while we're alive.
Yeah, for
It's
sure.
like, why would this point in history be so significant and important that like we are gonna finish humanity? You
Yeah.
know?
And the reason you know that it's egotistical is because there's so many stories. That's a cyclical story. I mean, almost
Right.
every generation thought that they had the day that was going to end everything. And that just shows that the human ego kept working and working and working.
Yeah, it's almost getting more frequent. It's like every 5 years instead of every 100 years.
Yeah, I know. Like, and it's funny that that happens. That we believe that we're going to be part of the group that experiences the last day, and I don't really. It doesn't bother me at all, you know, because I know
Yeah.
I'm going to die, so I don't care if we
Right,
die. You know what
right.
I mean?
And
Like,
it's I again have back and forth thoughts about this because I've witnessed death and it was scary the first time, the second time, the third time, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, this is like different. And then I noticed that I have a gift to where I was meant to be there when those people pass away, right? And for a while, I would blame myself. I wasn't able to save this person. Like I wasn't being a good enough nurse or something, right? But my presence was definitely powerful, and the patients that passed would be at peace in my presence, and the families would often do the same and express gratitude to me afterwards, and all of those things are so important, right?
yeah.
And it for a while it put me at peace, like wow, one day this is going to be me with my loved ones and one day it's going to be me passing over, and I was like okay with that. And then I started like really thinking about, oh, make me anxious and like that. It's scary to think that, tomorrow we might not be able to do this again, but that's why we have to be grateful in the moments that we do have.
Yeah.
One of our one of our commonalities between everyone is that we try to anticipate the future, and that's what anxiety arises from, right? Because
Right.
the unknowing of the future. But everything we do when it comes to our financial planning, when it comes to me preparing myself in the morning and driving somewhere, we're always trying to anticipate. We have a schedule, we have a calendar, we're trying to guess what's going to happen, we try to plan what's going to happen, and then when those plans get disrupted or when those plans get ended, it's like, whoa, that's a triggering event, right?
Yeah.
And that's a normal response to have. And so it's like now I'm a little more understanding with people not wanting to talk about death because it is scary. But again, it's something we all experience. And it's, maybe the scariest thing you will experience. But at the same time, it's inevitable, right? And it happens in so many different ways. And I had to let myself realize that a lot of the death I've seen is peaceful compared to what other people have to deal with or witness,
Right.
Shout out to our firefighters, first responders, military personnel, because it's just a whole different level and it's reality and the same.
Yeah, and I can't even make a direct quote from a hip hop artist because there's so many that have said this, But so many artists have said, are you scared to die or are you scared to live? Because it's like, yeah, one day you're going to die. But why are you living with fear? Why aren't you chasing the goals that you want to set for yourself? Because, like, are you more afraid to go live or are you afraid to die?
And it's not the things that'll kill us that we're most afraid of.
Mm-hmm.
People still drive 100 miles an hour down the road and pick fights with strangers and all this crazy stuff, but it's like, oh, I'm afraid to talk in a group of 10 people.
Man, right? Like that's the I wish I could remember the whole speech that Timo Cruz did on Coach Carter. But remember when he was like, our biggest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our biggest fear is that basically that we're so great that we're not going to go out and be great, right? And that's really how it happens. Sometimes you can just be so afraid to let your light shine and be great that it stifles you.
It's
right?
interesting how it works. Yeah. Fear is a protective mechanism that's built within us. It's important, it's needed, but it has to be controlled. It has to be controlled. And yeah, I heard someone made the analogy of like, you're a thermometer, you're heating up, but you've never seen that 100-degree mark. And you're building up, you're at 90, you're at 95. All of a sudden, it's like, ooh, it's getting hot in here. Like, I don't know what it feels like to be that hot. Maybe I should cool it down a little bit. But it's like, no, you're meant to be 150 degrees. Like, that 100 mark is just your first step.
For sure.
And you just keep getting up to it and pulling back. And everybody has to ask themselves, what is it that is causing me to shy away from greatness? A lot of the times it's the perception of other people. Are they gonna think that my greatness is all that great? Are they gonna think that I'm putting up a facade or trying to be somebody that I'm not supposed to be? That's another thing, imposter syndrome. So many people don't feel deserving of accomplishment or deserving of praise that they see other people get. And when it comes down to it, the praise shouldn't even be the goal.
No.
The recognition shouldn't even be the goal.
No.
The accomplishment has to be something within you that's going to be fulfilling and something that's going to serve your purpose that you've determined, and you have that understanding, hopefully just between you and God.
Right.
Because the true purpose behind it is never going to be able to be articulated to another person in full.
Never. Or understood, right?
Or understood.
But the feeling that you give them when you're great around them will be felt.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why I love that quote of like, people don't remember what you said to them, they remember how you made them feel. And I think that's the true mark of your greatness, is just when multiple people are like, man, when he was around, it was just a utility. He was just helpful and an asset to whatever situation I was in. Made me feel not like I was judged, but felt like I was empowered to try to do my best.
Yep.
And that's just a huge thing I strive for. I think another reason why it's hard for people to be great is because they don't feel like they deserve it. They feel like for some reason they're like the person that doesn't deserve to expand and become their highest self.
Like, oh, I try so hard and I'm so good to everyone, but I just, this isn't what I'm supposed to have. Like, I'm not worthy. It's like, why? Why is that person worthy and you're not? How? And I work on this with my clients because I work with a lot of successful people that have the same limiting mindset as other people that we might not see as being as successful, whether it's their degrees or their wealth or the family they've built. We all have self-doubts and limitations that we put upon ourselves. And I always say the greatest limitations that you'll ever face are the ones that you put upon yourself. So the people that are able to strip away those self-limiting factors are the ones that excel, and it looks like they're accomplishing something that is impossible, right? But the fact that they told themselves they're capable was the first step to them being able to at least try.
Exactly.
And some people are afraid to try because they're afraid to fail, right? And all those people we admire that are at the top have failed in some way or another, whether it's direct in the industry that they're currently thriving in or something else that was related. And that fear is always going to be debilitating if you let it overcome you.
Man, and this is crazy because I just had this conversation because I was talking to this student about what the Renaissance Festival is, right? And why they celebrate a Renaissance Festival. So I asked him, I'm like, what does the word Renaissance mean? And he's just like, man, I don't really know what that means. So we look it up, right? Renaissance is when something is dormant, the act of it becoming active, giving it new life, rejuvenation of a dormant object or being. And so I tell them, they celebrate this because it's important to celebrate your renaissance. It's important to celebrate what what philosophy you found that took your spirit from being dormant and potential to kinetic and bursting and alive, because it was some process that renaissanced it.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually came from information and intelligence.
Yeah.
Right. And we do that within ourselves. We have multiple renaissances, and I believe we should celebrate those renaissances.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's almost like a Pokemon, right? First come out the ball, it looked like something else, and then all of a sudden, one day it morphs into this big, powerful creature. And I think that, like you said, we do that over time, or like the butterfly example, right? But we keep turning to a bigger, more beautiful, stronger butterfly that's more capable of flying higher and higher.
Yeah.
But if you stay in the cocoon and you're afraid to fly and let your wings spread, then you're never going to reach your potential, right?
Right, because we go through the metamorphosis, but we have free will. So it's like
will.
that's like the
You don't have to change. You don't have to grow. It's okay. You can stay where you are if you want to, but all of that's up there for you to take, right?
Right. I know. I've been reading that book called The Boy Crisis, and it just gets into kind of how the phenomena of Western societies and how they have like what they call failure to launch. It kind of is the same thing you're describing right now, where we have this idea that we don't have as much purpose in our walk, especially as young men. And it gets us to this point where we kind of have a hard time expanding our wings and flying away, right?
So. Yeah. A lot of us don't know what it looks like because either we don't have the male figure to set the example for us, or there's been some other image that we think we're supposed to be filling and don't understand that there's all these different routes and opportunities, and we might be looking up to someone that has a different background, a different environment, and we think, oh, we don't have the resources to get to where that person's at. And it's always comparison that is kind of our failure point, right? Because if we just believe in what's going on here and know that this is only the beginning, God willing, that just unlocks a whole boatload of potential.
Yeah.
And I take pride in being able to help younger people realize that, because there's so many things that I never had anyone directly tell me that I was not capable of something. Like, I grew up in a pretty supportive environment with good friends and good community, and I'm very blessed and grateful for that. There are things on my own part that I limited myself from doing. And whether it was from me feeling like I was going to be judged by the people that supported me, or the kids that I was friends with in school at the time, or whatever it may be, it's all fear. It's all fear and judgment, the fear of judgment. And it's hard to let kids know that 14-year-old that you're worried about judging you, first of all, they're not going to care in 5 years.
No.
Second of all, if they do judge you, that's on them, right?
They're goofy.
They're goofy. They might say you're goofy, you're corny, but if you want to go sing in the choir or be in a play or have your own little television broadcast talking about plants,
right,
you do that.
For sure.
And you do it consistently and you put your heart into it, and it's going to be great.
For sure. And 20 years from now, hurt people are still going to hurt people, right? So it's like, it's an easy equation there.
Yeah. And it's just so interesting seeing the people that kept the same maladaptive behaviors over time and where they ended up, versus the people that either were always loving or had a change of heart at some point, either after high school and college, whatever it may be. They had a kid, started a family, and all of a sudden they're different. And I love seeing those people that change, the people that used to be a little bit evil, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, you're cool. Because so many people won't give them a second chance. It's like, no, you hurt me, like, you said these things, and like, you're dead to me type, right? But I'm just sitting here like, man, I hope they understand one day,
Because they'll be so powerful.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be such a powerful voice, because people will be able to relate to the fact that they didn't do the right thing. And then you'll also be able to know, like, wow, this person is choosing to show love. It's not like they only know love and to come off like they're not a threat. It's like they were a threat, and now they're choosing to show you a non-threatening face and a loving face. And I always feel like that's a lot more real.
I mean, we even went through a short phase, right? Where I'll say it's probably 3 year phase, 2-3 year phase, where we're just like, on a rampage.
Oh my gosh. I know. I know.
And it was like a transitional period. Me and Russ met each other in sixth grade. We're starting middle school, so it was a transitional period. You know, you go into those preteen years and turn into a teenager, and hormones start changing. You're a little more aggressive, and all of a sudden you have this confidence that you don't know how to control, and you become an athlete, and people are like cheering for you, and it's a different feeling. It's a
Yeah.
different feeling, and you're like the process of going from like a boy to a teen to a man can be very confusing. And I always say I'm just grateful that we learned the lessons we did when we did the way that we did, because a lot of people were learning the same lessons and doing similar things and had less favorable outcomes.
For sure. That's why we got to grace of God, whatever it might be. But I have to give thanks for whatever that was. Like, me protected for sure.
And it wasn't us getting in trouble that taught us a lesson. And I'm grateful for that, because I mean, we're hopefully going to have a guest on soon that, you know, he had to learn a couple lessons the hard way, you know?
Yeah.
And he was, I don't know if you would consider him in your circle, but he was part of my circle, you know? And I feel bad because at one point I judged him, you know? And lo and behold, like, we were doing some similar things at some point, right? And then luckily I took the correct path. And, you know, when we're given opportunities with a S, you got to make a decision, right?
Man.
And certain opportunities might look better than others because they might have a more immediate outcome.
Right.
And those usually aren't the right decision.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to having that conversation for sure. Right, man.
And that's the thing, like, you can learn so many things from different people, and their presentation might not be right for you, but the lesson is there. And sometimes we look at everything around the person, like what their past is or what they quote unquote represent, but sometimes it's like they're still speaking facts.
Yes.
And you can't just overlook the facts that they're speaking because you don't agree with some other things they're interested in.
Yeah, and you obviously have to come to the thought of, who am I to judge, right? Because you can't judge, you can't say that you're better just because you're in some situation where your you know, demons are more hidden deeper in your closet than theirs are, and so you feel like you can judge them. That's crazy.
Yeah, because we're all dealing with something, and the average person is not going to expose those dealings to the world. I don't think that that's in your best interest to do that. But you do need to process them, and they should be on the surface to an extent, because the digger you deep them, the harder it is to get them out.
Yeah.
And then the bigger they'll grow.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. My boy Russ has some engagements to go to. You got to rep some basketball this evening.
Go communicate effectively.
Communicate effectively, set boundaries, and run the show.
Yeah.
But this is a good conversation. Again, thank God for the opportunity. Thank everybody for listening. Give us some feedback on maybe what type of guests you would like to see, because we're trying to keep it diverse. We're getting to a point where it's like, ooh, I want to have some people back on, but I also want to get some feedback from the audience, because I know a lot of people like the financial discussion, but also a lot of people are like, that went way over my head. It's hard for me to listen to that stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, because it's a complicated subject. That's why we have people like Tyler that can take care of it for you, right?
Right.
Because it is important. And again, we all have to deal with money, and there's so many situations and I guess issues that we all have to deal with, and we kind of just put it away because we don't like it.
Right.
And that's kind of our purpose here, to have discussions about things that we might not necessarily want to talk about, but we need to.
Yeah,
because it's going to help us.
Right. We try to shine the light on things that we might be unconscious of.
So now that you are aware of our objective here, please reach out to us and let us know, because we couldn't be doing this without y'all. Just kidding. We could do it, but we are appreciative of having an audience, and we're going to be here regardless. So continue to tune in on Thursdays and be looking out for the next guest. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I did want to mention that. As a nurse, I think it's important to let everyone know that early recognition is the key. So get your checkups, ladies, self-exams, mammographies, all that good stuff. Don't procrastinate, because the longer you wait, the more insidious that the situation could be. Very important. Go pink. All right, y'all. Thank you.
Yeah. And like last week, we'll see you next week. Peace.
Peace.